What it do, YouTube? It's your boy, No Buckets. And I'm coming at you with an NBA video that I thought would be really interesting to y'all, the viewers. It's gonna be the first video on the channel. I hope y'all gonna enjoy this, cause as much as I am, cause I'm gonna enjoy this video. And this video hit home. It's gonna be a very interesting video about a team that I'm a huge fan of, the team that I support, called, the one and only, the Houston Rockets. So let's get right into it. So in 2017, Mike D'Antoni was hired for the Houston Rockets, coming off of the year where the Rockets went 41 and 41, I believe, with the whole Dwight Howard, Kevin McHale, James Harden fiasco. They had a little beef going on, and the team ended up struggling. Apparently, James Harden came into camp overweight. Dwight Howard was injured almost every other game, and the Rockets are just a dysfunctional organization. So after that season where we scraped into the playoffs in the AC and got bounced by the Warriors in 5 games, there was some big changes to be made. So in the offseason, one of the first things to do on the list was to find a new head coach. So the Rockets go into the head coach search, and they come out with a guy that has a good track record in the regular season, but was known for coming short in the playoffs, none other than Mike D'Antoni. So when Mike D'Antoni's hired, GM Daryl Morey immediately goes into looking for players that fit his system. With James Harden spearheading the roster, they go ahead, they sign. The first acquisition, I believe, was Ryan Anderson. They signed him on a 4-year, $80 million contract, which was, us Rockets fans didn't really think it was bad at the time, because Rockets were always in and out of the Ryan Anderson sweepstakes. So when we got Ryan Anderson, it was just like, okay, that's a good move. We're gonna go ahead and get him. And yeah, we finally got a good shooting big man that can stretch the floor, because Mike D'Antoni's offense, he loves stretch bigs, he loves shooters, so we got to get 3-point shooters. So the next acquisition the Rockets do is we get Eric Gordon. And once we sign Eric Gordon was a guy that, I don't know, he was in New Orleans the year before. He had I guess an okay season. He averaged about, let me see, I'm gonna pull up right here for y'all. He averaged 15 points and 3 assists, and he was fairly efficient. 46 from the field and 38% from 3. That's actually really good. So yeah, we signed him, and once we signed him, we still, if you looked at the media reports from then, everyone didn't really think too much of what the Rockets were doing. Of course, we let Dwight Howard walk. That was one of the big things. We let him walk. And when the Rockets hired Mike D'Antoni, everyone figured, and everyone knew that Dwight Howard was going, because what all happened with Dwight Howard and in LA with Mike D'Antoni. It wasn't really a good fit. So as soon as that happened, everyone pretty much knew Dwight Howard was gone. So Dwight Howard eventually signed with the Atlanta Hawks. And yeah, so the Rockets went ahead and they signed little guys from little acquisitions after that. But the 3 main acquisitions to the Houston Rockets that offseason was Mike D'Antoni, Ryan Anderson, and Eric Gordon. So the Rockets go into the season, and Mike D'Antoni releases a report that James Harden will be playing point guard and spearheading the offense. So everybody goes crazy about that. So season started, James Harden puts up these ridiculous numbers, high points, high assists. It's just, everybody's in awe. That season happens, and James Harden ends up being the runner-up for MVP behind Russell Westbrook's crazy season, triple-double season, 30 points. Completely carries that Oklahoma City Thunder team to the playoffs. One of the craziest seasons I've ever seen. One of the craziest MVPs I've ever seen. Well deserved. I don't have no rebuttal against that. Of course, James Harden had a great season, averaged 29-11, but you can't be the triple double and carrying the team all the way up there. Even though James Harden carried his team um, to the I think the third seed that year, it's just you can't beat the triple double. So the playoffs comes is James Harden versus Russell Westbrook, MVP versus MVP runner up. You know, I'm pretty sure everybody expected that result. James Harden and the Houston Rockets bounced the Thunder out in 5 games, and it's just we all expected that. Russell Westbrook by himself, he puts up good numbers, even though it's not on the best efficiency. He puts up great numbers, but they still lose because he does not have enough help. Let's be real, he did not have help. So the next round, Houston Rockets versus the San Antonio Spurs. It's second round, Western Conference semifinals 2017. Second seed San Antonio Spurs versus the Houston Rockets. Third seed Houston Rockets. So that series, it ended in a crazy order. So you have game 5. It was tied 2-2. It came down to the wire. Comes down to James Harden attempting a 3. Manu Ginobili coming up behind him, blocking his shot. We know that story. Spurs win that game, Rockets lose. Rockets have a game 6 in Houston. Here's the game right here. Game 6 in Houston. No Kawhi Leonard. No Tony Parker. Spurs come in that game, blow out the Houston Rockets at the Toyota Center in Houston. James Harden has a horrible game. In my opinion, his worst playoff game in his whole career. Comes in 2 of 11, I think 11 turnovers. It was bad. It didn't look like James Harden was too invested into what was going on. It just looked bad. So the Rockets go ahead and lose that series and go into offseason with a lot of question marks, a lot of slander towards James Harden and his playoff blunder. And everyone is just Houston Rockets fans. Well, I'm not gonna lie, we were pretty upset about James Harden because it looked like he didn't show no effort. Even though he didn't have much help, he didn't show no effort. So, so we go into the off season we're very confused. Houston Rockets are very confused. We don't know what's going on. We know we need more players to actually contend because James Harden needs some help. So after the season, here comes the big part. It is June 28th in 2017. Early in the morning, most people just rolling out of bed. It's 11 in the morning, 11:30 in the morning, 11:25 in the morning to be exact, Central Time. A report comes out that the Rockets have traded for Chris Paul. Rockets get Chris Paul. They trade just a huge haul for Chris Paul. They trade Lou Williams, Patrick Beverly, Harold, which is basically the main 3, and a couple of picks for Chris Paul. Chris Paul coming to the Houston Rockets. Crazy move. Has the whole NBA world in shambles. It's crazy. Completely crazy. Everybody is just going crazy, literally. And so when we make that move, all Rockets fans are happy. James Harden finally got some help. But immediately after that happens, first reports come out. There's only one basketball. Both of those players are too ball dominant to work. Everybody has their piece in saying that Chris Paul and James Harden are not going to work because they both like to have the ball in their hands. Chris Paul is ball heavy. James Harden is ball dominant. Both of them, they're not going to be able to coexist. That is what everybody's saying. But us Rockets fans, we don't believe it. We know who James Harden is. We know James Harden what James Harden is capable of doing. So after all those reports, after all the off-season acquisitions, the Rockets basically signed P.J. Tucker, Luke Muhammad. I don't know if I'm saying that right. After that, and when the season comes in, so as that season starts, the Rockets set the league on fire and eventually have the league best record that season, winning 65 games. and only losing 17 times. And James Harden wins MVP, and it's just the whole city of Houston is in a blaze. The Rockets completely dominated that season. Chris Paul and James Harden are coexisting. It's just a beautiful time in Houston. First seed, we go into the first round of the playoffs. We beat the Timberwolves in 5. We go second round, take care of the Jazz in 6. And game 6, that closeout games when Chris Paul goes absolutely nuts. It was just a sight to see. Chris Paul finishes that game with 41 points and 10 assists. 41 points and 10 assists. Like right there, and not to mention the 0 turnovers. So Chris Paul is at the height of his career right here. He's going into the Western Conference Finals for his first time in this. And I don't know how many years at the time, but it was a pretty long career. First time in his career, he's going to the Western Conference Finals. And everything is looking good. Even though the Rockets are facing the defending champs, the super team, the greatest team of all time, in my opinion, the Golden State Warriors with KD and Steph Curry. So everybody, this has been the talk for the whole season, and now they're finally meeting up. Game 1, James Harden drops 40 points, but the Warriors just too much to handle, and the Rockets lose. Game 2, here come the Rockets, moving the ball better. James Harden still has a great game. They're moving the ball, and the Rockets win. Like the series is all you can ask for. The games are close. The stars are competing. It's like, what more can you ask? This has been the talk of the year for the whole season, and we're finally here. And it's like it's living up to the competition that we wanted. So yeah, game 2, the Rockets blow out the Warriors 127-105. Game 3, this is when the Rockets get smoked, absolutely smoked by the Warriors at the Oracle Arena, 85-126. Game 4 was probably my favorite game of the series watching at the time. It was a close game, wasn't a high scoring, it was a defensive game, it was just grit and grind. The Rockets win that game 95-92 to tie the series up. It is 2-2. Ties the series up. James Harden with 30 points. PJ Tucker has 16 rebounds. 16 rebounds in that game. 6'4" PJ Tucker has 16 rebounds. Ridiculous. So game 5 is at the Toyota Center in Houston. This game right here is probably the biggest game of the series. The Rockets win this one. Chris Paul is having a great game. A great game. But this is when everything goes downhill for the Houston Rockets organization. In the closing minutes of the game, Chris Paul has this moment. He injures his hamstring and has to limp off the court. And the Rockets still win that game. But here Chris Paul is getting injured when he's needed the most. Rockets are up 3-2. And the Rockets organization, the NBA world, does not know if he's going to play. And reports eventually come out and say he's not playing in Game 6. So the Rockets go to the Oracle Arena. They get it, surprisingly enough, they get a big halftime lead in the first half, but they blow it, and they eventually get blown out by the Warriors. Now the series is tied 3-3. Now everybody's wondering, will Chris Paul play Game 7? Will he play Game 7? Chris Paul eventually is ruled out for Game 7. And the Rockets, again, have a big-time lead in the first half to start the game. A double-digit lead. Then that second half comes. Warriors start coming into effect. The huge 0-of-27 streak from 3 comes in for the Houston Rockets. And they blow the lead. And the Warriors win the series in 7 games. Everything goes downhill. So in the rest of the playoffs, the biggest question was, What would have happened if Chris Paul never got hurt in Game 5? And here comes the offseason. In the offseason, the Rockets lose one of their key pieces in Trevor Ariza when Tillman Fertitta does not want to pay luxury tax. So we lose Trevor Ariza due to contract situation, and he signs with the Phoenix Suns. And the Rockets are without a good 3-and-D small forward. Chris Paul is still a little injured, and yeah, it's not looking good for the Houston Rockets. So they go into the next season, 2018-19 season. James Harden, Chris Paul have a slow start, but they have a slow start, and then in December, Chris Paul gets injured again with the hamstring against Miami. And then this is when James Harden goes on historic runs of 30-point streaks and scoring high points, scoring 40, 50. Crazy streak of carrying the Rockets while Chris Paul is injured. Chris Paul eventually comes back, but he never looks the same. The Rockets go into the playoffs that season, and they beat the Jazz in the first round. Then they go against the Warriors, and this is where Chris Paul is seen to be not the same. He wasn't that Chris Paul from last season. Honestly, like it was either he was injured or they felt like it was father time, but he does not look the same. So Chris Paul, James Harden lose that series in 6 games, even after KD goes down in Game 5 and doesn't play in Game 6. What was thought to be the perfect opportunity for the Houston Rockets to win that series, the Rockets lose in 6 games. So going into that offseason, there was a lot of reports between Chris Paul and James Harden getting into it. A bunch of feuds. Like, it wasn't looking good for the Houston Rockets. The 2 superstars were going at it. It didn't seem like they liked each other until eventually Chris Paul gets traded for Russell Westbrook. Now this right here is really the demise of the Houston Rockets franchise and the turning point, because after this right here, the Rockets traded a lot of picks, first round picks, for what we thought would have been an upgrade from Chris Paul to Russell Westbrook, and it just wasn't the same. Wasn't the same results. Wasn't the same results. Rockets going to that season with Russell Westbrook, James Harden. Of course, Houston is hype. We all think it's an upgrade because Chris Paul didn't look the same. We thought he was getting washed. He thought he was getting injured. So after that happens, the Rockets go into that season. The fit doesn't look entirely the best in the first half of the season. Russell Westbrook doesn't look like he's fitting in too well. And that's when the Rockets decide to trade our star center, Clint Capella, for Covington to open up the floor for Russell Westbrook so he can dominate in a better, efficient fashion, which does help Russell Westbrook. And he goes on this streak of averaging 30 points on efficient numbers. And it's ridiculous. Russell Westbrook looks like probably the best point guard in the league around that time. And then that's when the pandemic happens. Season is cut short. And yeah, that's Russell Westbrook. After the season resumes, and Russell Westbrook catches COVID before, and then he has the quad injury, and he never looks the same in the playoffs. Rockets beat the Thunder in 7 games, and then they go into and they lose to the eventual champs, the Los Angeles Lakers, when they completely ignore Russell Westbrook on the 3-point line and double James Harden, and the Rockets couldn't do anything. So, yeah, after that happens, that's when the Rockets really go downhill. James Harden reveals that he wants to leave Houston. Russell Westbrook wants to leave Houston. First domino to fall, Russell Westbrook was traded for John Wall in a first-round pick, a protected first-round pick. And James Harden wants to leave. The Rockets try to hold on to him. but it ends up being bad. He forces his way out. Rockets eventually trade James Harden to Brooklyn for a bunch of picks, and yeah, needless to say, the Rockets are in the lottery. I'm looking forward to the lottery. What's the worst team in the league record-wise? Even though we do have some good future assets, it's going to be a long rebuilding process. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video on the Houston Rockets, the rise and fall of the Houston Rockets. And if you want to see more videos like this, or if you want me to talk about a story about any NBA team, anything, comment down below, like, subscribe to the video for more videos. And this is fun. I enjoy doing this, and I hope y'all enjoy me doing these type of videos. And yeah, peace.